Well, hello and welcome to the Rugby Ruckus Tight 5. A bit of a slower week with no game to talk about, so maybe I'll talk a bit slower this week, Morgs. I listened back last week and I hammered it a bit. Mate, but I'll tell you what, for those of you who are watching, we are live on Facebook, we are live on Twitter, and it's great to be there. Or, of course, you may be listening to our podcast, which comes out a little bit later tonight on Apple or on Spotify. But if you are watching, you've got the absolute pleasure of seeing Morgan Turinui with his new headphones on, a new microphone, because we've had some feedback that he gets a bit soft to listen to. But Morgs, can you hear me and can we hear you?
Well, I can hear you well. Hopefully you guys can hear me. I can't eat for a week because of how much these things cost. But, and if the kids don't steal them to play Xbox, I should be able to use these in the future. So it's good that people are happy to hear me. I think everyone was looking for the Gus Gould mute button, so obviously I'm not one of those, so I'm pretty happy with that.
Very good, mate. Look, let's not muck around. Let's talk about what's on the show. It's the Tight 5 Live. Look, give me a second here and I'll bring it up. We've got a very special guest waiting in the green room. We want to get to him soon because he's always an absolute pleasure to listen to when he talks about rugby. But tonight, it's all about the Bledisloe Cup this week, of course. We've got Andrew Mehrtens about to come on. We're going to talk about the All Blacks. We're going to talk about the Wallabies. There's an old Super Rugby photo I want to show because I want to talk about the changing nature of Super Rugby with South Africa, obviously, dipping out at least next year, yet to be determined what happens after that. And then, Morgs, we've got the triple Q with Lukhan Salakaia-Loto, which is your quick quarantine questions where you caught up with some of the boys while they're in quarantine. This one's a good one too. The line I like out of this one is when you asked Lukhan where he wanted to play in the back line. He had quite a good line on that about what he said to Dave Rennie and that. But, mate, you looking forward to chatting to Mehrts?
Yeah, because it's always interesting. It's funny enough, it's always good to see him do the lunchtime speaking circuit and things like that. He tells a good story, and what I find also is he talks himself down a lot. So I want to delve into his career a bit because I don't want to duck the fact that this guy is an absolute All Black great. So I can't wait to get Mehrts in. I had to say that just before we brought him in. I don't want him to hear that.
Mate, I'm sorry to tell you, but he can hear you in the green room. We'll get him on in a second. Before we do, don't forget you can get to the Rugby Ruckus shop, rugbyruckus.com shop. That one's the podcast they play and have a little play on words there. Wonderful stuff. And, of course, thank you again to all of those who have signed up to our newsletter. The newsletter has been absolutely flying. What you got last week on the newsletter was I did a deep dive. It was about 1,700 words in the end on what the broadcast offers on the table for Australia mean at the moment. For those of you who know, I've worked at Fox Sports, I've worked at Channel 9, I've worked at Fairfax. So I know a lot of the media scene, and I wrote a couple of thousand words. Morgs talked about the Wallabies and what you might see this week, and we also had a little piece on you playing for Eddie Jones, Morgs, which was very interesting as well. I'm just going to put up the names quickly as well. Thank you to all the guys at the bottom of our screen who are our super supporters. These guys, and I have to put up two different screens for these guys now because the numbers are growing. They make a big difference for us, Morgs, in bringing this content out there, and we really appreciate it. But let's move to the guest of the evening. Let me just take off this screen and bring him in. But it's an absolute pleasure to get this legend of the game, All Blacks 5'8" for a number of years. I used to hate seeing him pick because I knew we were in trouble. There he is. Andrew Mehrtens, how are you, buddy?
You're good. You've probably got a lot of disappointed people out there now with this sort of a head coming on your screen, but anyway.
Morgs, you've already given him a little bit of an intro, but it's nice to see his face and get him on the show.
Yeah, it is, mate. And you look at the timeline. I'm much younger than Mehrts, obviously, as you can see on the screen. But grew up watching him. 944th capped All Black, 70 tests, just under 1,000 test points. This is a true great of the game in one of the great teams as well. Excellent performances at World Cups, excellent performances week in, week out, excellent performances against the Wallabies. And, the most underrated person is the goal kicker. We love to blame them when we lose, and we don't really put them up on a pedestal when they kick the goals they should and then the ones that they probably didn't have to. Mehrts was an absolute giant of the game. I know he'll like to talk down his defensive capabilities, but in terms of what's the goal in rugby? Win games by scoring points. He scored points better than most in the game, that's for sure.
I like it, mate. I like your perspective on it, and I think you're right. I think we've lost the respect for goal kickers, or certainly some of the respect we used to have. All these tight head props now that they talk about anchoring the scrum and stuff like that. How important it is up front. Mate, it all goes back to the kicker. You're absolutely right.
Yeah, well, and if they win the penalty at scrum time, if you don't kick the goal, what's the point?
Yeah, that's a good point. Well, you run very quickly back to halfway. I tell you what, get behind them so they don't eyeball you. That's what you do.
That's it, guys. Look, it's Bledisloe time. We're a couple of Bledisloes in. We didn't even know we'd have this at the start of the year, Mehrts. It's been fantastic to see the footy actually on. How have you found those first couple of Bledisloes, mate? Australia went over there. They squeezed a draw out of you, and then in that second game, the All Blacks, 10 or 15 minutes where they really put it onto us and took that one away. How have you seen the series so far, bud?
Yeah, a little bit muddling, I guess, from both teams. Some errors that we might not expect if they'd had a few games together. So I think in Australia the Wallabies have done pretty well, especially blooding some new young guys. The All Blacks have been blooding sort of younger players for a long time now, but they're in the context of a really strong, stable platform that they're putting them on, really, and it's been easier for them for the last 10 or so years with the depth to bring those younger players in. So with the Wallabies, it's a bit of a tougher ask, and I think they did that pretty well. Like I say, there are a few mistakes from both teams, and you get that early season. Normally, of course, you're playing sort of tier 2 nations in the early tests, and you can sort of get away with it. But in these games, when you're trying to hit the ground running straight away, it's a little more unforgiving. So I've really enjoyed the footy. I enjoyed the draw. I thought the drama was great. I'm sure the viewership in Australia last weekend for the match in Auckland was much higher than it would have been with, kind of the sort of run-of-the-mill All Blacks rolling over the Wallabies in Wellington. So yeah, it's been great to watch. I'm looking forward to the next two matches.
Mate, in those first two games, you say, as and you're right, which is they often it can be an overseas team or a tier 2 team to get you into the game a little bit more. What did you see in the way the games approached it? Was it fairly simple stuff? Do you expect it to change up in the next couple of games as these teams find their way into the season more?
Well, I think I sort of expect the All Blacks to get progressively more physical throughout the games. I think we saw a huge step up from, and it's not my bread and butter, the physicality side, as you know, Morgs, but I think we saw a huge step up from Wellington. I thought in Wellington, the All Blacks, in a similar way to that semi-final against England in the World Cup last year, the way the All Blacks were playing is they go up in defence wanting to steal the ball back. So at times they're prepared to concede a few metres rather than just making a straight out, bludgeoning sort of a tackle. And so it's not getting cute, but it's with a view to getting the ball back. And I think Australia was able to get on the front foot and take advantage of the way the All Blacks were defending. So I think we saw a different All Black team in Auckland where they just stood up and said, right, we're going to base our game on physicality. And I think that's traditionally been something that you've had to do against the Wallabies. I think the Wallabies have always been a team, certainly since when I was playing against them, that just very, very technically proficient, very good at the breakdown. And I think, sometimes it's a physical game. There are no two ways around it. You just got to go out and smack the other team as hard as you can. Doesn't work against South Africa, inevitably. But I think that's what the All Blacks see. Maybe they have a little bit of advantage over the Wallabies.
Mate, I'll ask this of both of you, and I'll go to Morgs first and then you, Mehrts. But talking about the era you played it and looking at the footy today, what's really different, do you think, about that game? What's changed in the game since you blokes were playing?
I would have thought the physical capabilities of the players, really, it's almost like there's less space on the field just because the athletes that are there now can cover those spaces much better. I think, 30 years ago, there was no such thing as drift defence, and that came in. Defence has got better. You look at the 99 World Cup with the Wallabies and the way they really won that World Cup on defence. And then from there, with the league influences and the onset of professionalism, there's just begun to be less and less space on the rugby field due to the abilities in defence, and that makes it harder and probably makes some of the footy we play at times, especially in cycles, a bit more pragmatic. That's the way I see it. So it needs a really good attacking group, a good coaching setup, some great cohesion, some great time together to start to unlock some of these great defensive systems around the world.
What about you, Mehrts?
Yeah, I think pretty much the same. The regeneration of the defensive line is just so much better now. Forwards in particular are fitter. They get up off the ground really, really quickly, back in the line, and you don't really identify, well, unless you've got real out and out gas, but it's a lot harder. You don't often see backs just running around forwards just because they're a forward anymore. Whereas 20 years ago, you're standing opposite a forward, you'd want the ball to try and go around him. So, these days they chase you down. And, so the defensive capabilities have heightened. And also I think just the savvy way they approach the breakdown, you don't need to overcommit. If you can get away with just putting one or two players in, the way things are being refereed, and that's another whole topic, and you don't want to start me on that because I'll be here till Friday.
We'll get back to that.
The way things are being refereed, it's very, very easy for a couple of defenders to slow down the ball enough to need 4 or 5 attackers committed in to that breakdown. So again, it leaves the defensive line being well numbered against the attack. So it's almost a bit more stop start. It's a bit like rugby league in a way that every phase is a restart, is a new start. But rugby league's dealt with it in a way that the defensive team's got to backpedal 10 metres every time, and we don't have that in rugby. You're up at the last man's feet. So it's a tough gig.
Mate, you've raised that. Let's chase that a little bit. What would you change? And I think I just saw a question from one of the other guys watching, Michael Taheen. What would you change then? Well, it's particularly when you're talking about that breakdown, you're talking about the way it's affecting the rolling of the game, how the game can keep moving, the agility of the game. What would you change?
I was going to wait for Morgs because I feel like I've been yapping too much, which is probably all I do, isn't it? But you go, mate.
Well, that's what you're here for. I just want to sit back and relax and listen to you. Look, I suppose when we talk about that comment that popped up too about the laws that were changed, I don't think we predicted how big a change the maul use it or lose it law would create. The game of rugby became a place where the ball was on the ground a lot more than the ball being up. You remember if you watch the older footage of 8 forwards piling into a maul just trying to go forward, what they did create was a lot of people on the ball and space elsewhere, but also that just when you commit those forwards, that just gives you some different nuances to play off. At the moment, tackle, ruck, good decision making that Mehrts alluded to before about whether to pilfer, whether to counter ruck, whether to have a crack at the ball, whether you're trying to plug a body in there to make the opposition commit. Now that the ball is on the ground at ruck time and there's no rucking, it's really created a very different way of playing the game where more and more bodies are in the defensive line. So, look, I think it'd be really hard to go back to the maul. Imagine we played mauls and you got the ball back and you pushed it forward. You'd just be mauling all the way through the game. So, in terms of having an answer around what the ruck and maul laws are, I can't see us being able to repeal that and try to look backwards. I think we commit to where we are. The other thing is I think we have to have a bigger emphasis once again on defenders getting out of the way and players attacking the ball. I think we need to be really diligent on the letter of the law, hands on the ground, guys not trying to steal the ball but just trying to crouch down over the ball and milk a penalty. We need to see the action of guys effectively trying to steal the ball and play from that. I think referees at the moment, they see someone over the ball, they're happy at every level to play a penalty. So I think we can just look at the way that we referee that ruck. And then I just think we need to be zero tolerance on offside. I think we just, I don't think we need people 2 metres back, but I think we've mentioned it before, Benny. I'd be interested to see what Mehrts says. But if we just get people onside, it'd be interesting to see how much more space there is.
Yeah, it's hard to see what I thought the touch judges or assistant referees or whatever you want to call them these days are supposed to be policing that, but the number of teams that are just encroaching a little bit, a foot here and there, it doesn't seem like much, but you add that sort of 2 feet where they're just slightly past the end of the ruck, and then they get a bit of a jump on and they anticipate the pass and stuff like that. It all just adds up to more pressure. And I'm with you, Morgs. I'd like to see the ruck simplified. I think it's too opaque, particularly from a non-rugby point of view. People, if we're going to be encouraging them to watch our game, watch our spectacle, and they're confused by what's going on, and it's stop-start all the time, there are penalties, and they're going, well, what happened there? Then that's no good for anyone. It's no good for our product. I think we need to give a bit of leniency to the attacking team. I think the attacking team needs some sort of advantage, and I think if the attacking team's made a bad mistake in terms of a decision and got isolated, then it's absolutely right that the ball should be stolen, or a piece of extraordinary play from the defence, the ball should be stolen. Absolutely agree with that. But I don't think that's happening. I think too many times the defence, it's just too easy. They're sticking their hands over the ball. They keep the ball in on the tackle player. I can't even remember which team it was because all teams are doing it. But that first Bledisloe, I remember thinking, like I say, I can't remember whether it was Australia or New Zealand. The tackled player had his arms out, didn't have his hands anywhere near the ball. The ball was on his chest, and the defensive player was holding it against his chest. The guy over the top of him, stapling over, and won the penalty. And I just think that's silly. I think we need to leave about a 1 second, which it used to be for the tackled player to play the ball. If at any point during that time there's contact from the two teams against one another, that's a ruck, and everyone gets their hands off. I don't think the referees are policing that very well, and I think the players have grown accustomed to being really, really cynical and know how to work it well. So I think just give a bit more help to the attacking team, which will help with continuity. It helps building pressure because they can string phases together rather than it being stop-start like this.
But I think your point
before you go, Benny, to jump in, I'd be interested to see Mehrts' opinion. So that 8 minutes after the final whistle in the first Bledisloe was some of the best rugby in terms of excitement, ball in play time that we've ever seen. And the two things I saw there were two teams that were shit scared to give away a penalty and a referee who put his whistle in his pocket. So I'm interested to see how we can create an environment where the players are fearful of giving away penalties and the referee doesn't want to intervene. And I thought that was a great 8 minutes of footy. The ball was in play the whole time. Whether we go drastic, we trial something where, if you give away a penalty at the ruck as an individual, you get a white card, and if you get a second one, you get a yellow and you're off. Maybe we do something like that. And it just encourages, hopefully, players not to give penalties away, and we see what the flow's like. And obviously, referees remembering that they're not there to referee to the letter of the law. They're there to facilitate a game of rugby, an entertaining game of rugby, hopefully. And at every level, they're there to facilitate enjoyment at the players, whether it's subbies down at colleagues on a Saturday morning, 8 o'clock in the morning when they're still hungover or still under the influence, or whether it's a test match. There's still got to be that enjoyment for participant and watcher. So, look, there's any time you change a law, 5 other things happen that you haven't considered. But I think there's something in that.
Yeah, I think the referees have become the masters of the universe, and I think it would pay for them to remember that they're an accessory to the game rather than the strategists and stuff like that. And I think an indication of that is when a guy like Romain Poit, the French referee, puts out a video of his or DVD, I suppose, modern terms. Puts out a DVD of
DVDs too, mate.
puts out some sort of footage around his day refereeing the French top 14 final. And you go, I think it's ass about face here a little bit, So I don't think the referees have got a very good feel for the game. I think that comes from the top down as well. I think what they're asked to do is kind of look at process so much without actually getting a feel for the game. And, there were some mistakes in that last 8 minutes at Wellington, absolutely. But you're right, Morgs, the players in that situation were scared to give away a penalty. And that's a great motivator to play within the laws. And I look back to a few years ago, I think there was the NRC or one competition in Australia where they thought, okay, it'd be a good idea to go 6 points for a try and only 2 points for a penalty. That'll encourage everyone to score tries. But the unforeseen effect of that, or consequence of that, was that players were happy to give away those 2 points for a penalty, and they infringed the whole time. So you do have to still wield a stick. And I think you're right. If a bloke's can be singled out for individually infringing, and he's done it 3 times in the game, gone, see you later, or even twice, let's come down a bit harder on negative play.
Mate, I think you're absolutely right, and the point that you made that I found really interesting there that I didn't pick up was what you're saying, that those players who were over the ball in that first game and who were just holding on the chest, it's exactly like the scrums these days. We see people scrummage not to win the ball, but scrummage for a penalty. They're in there trying to work a penalty out of the game. Same thing that we're seeing at the ruck, and that's not what you want to see. We don't need penalties in the game at all. Boys, let's move on to the 2 teams for this week, and I'll talk All Blacks first with our guest, obviously. The All Blacks team that's run around for the first 2 sides. Andrew, do you expect many changes to that? And one of the things I want to sort of understand too is Graham Henry passed the baton to Hansen. Hansen's passed it to Foster. Did you see an enormous difference in the team, in the Hansen team versus the Henry? And what do you think a Foster All Blacks team might do differently?
Probably not a lot, to be fair. I mean, they've been pretty successful in the last 10 or 12 years, haven't they? And part of that's evolving, of course, so you don't just want to keep doing the same things, but a lot of it's been player driven. So I think a lot of the innovations are often coming from the players, and the coaching staff is really there just to put the framework in place whereby those players can analyse their own game. I mean, they really are the experts. They're out on the field as well, and they bring a wealth of knowledge that perhaps the coaches don't quite have because they just can't be out there applying it. So, like I say, the staff's there to put that framework in place for the players. So I can't see a lot of change, to be honest. I mean, Foster's been part of that for, a few years now. So I don't think he's going to change things up massively. He's got similar personnel. You've got the Barrett and Aaron Smith, who's absolutely key to the All Blacks game. A few, new tyros, but they sort of fit into what the traditional role, I guess, as the All Blacks have developed it within their team over the last 10 or 12 years. You look at the likes of Hoskins Sotutu, who's probably going to play this weekend because Ardie Savea is at home on paternity duty, which is great. And Hoskins Sotutu will just come in and play his role the same, I guess, as a Kieran Reid. He's a pretty similar sort of player, and he was very good for the Blues. So I think that'll be a change that'll might lead to another change, because I think what we saw from Satutu in the Blues this year was he liberated Akira Ioane to play a much more judicious role. Akira Ioane's, a guy of undeniable talent, but when he's kind of the alpha male, having to do everything and truck the ball up and everything, he gets a little bit too combative. And I think he played a much more mature role at number 6 this year with the Blues when he had Satutu alongside, doing those carries. And I thought Ioane was massive on defence, and I thought when he picked his moments to run, he did it really well. So I would suspect that, when you talk about playing in combinations and whatnot, I think that's a combination that will come through this week. Frizzell maybe didn't have the barnstorming games that we saw from him in the Highlanders and Super Rugby. He may not have been asked to play the same sort of role, but I think this will be an opportunity this week to see those two guys, Satutu and Ioane, together.
Well, you don't expect the All Blacks to tinker much with a winning side. A couple of suggestions there from Mehrts.
No, I think that they get the opportunity to be settled. Mehrts referenced the physicality that the All Blacks brought, especially in the first 20 minutes of the second Bledisloe. We discussed it a few times, Benny. It was in the newsletter that when the All Blacks either are perceived to have been underwhelming or that they themselves think they've got to fix things, that the physicality will go up another notch. And that's always the secret ingredient to them performing well. And on the back of that, off the mistakes that they force, the unstructured footy they can play is lethal. I don't expect to see much difference. I'd love to see Frizzell come to the fore. I've been a bit of a fan of his for a while. It'd be great to see him freed up, as Mehrts mentioned, and we get to see him at his best. Not great for Wallabies supporters, but great for people that support the game and All Black supporters. That's a really nicely balanced back row still. It's not like they lose anything there. As good as Sevilla is, those guys are excellent footballers. And it's interesting to see whether the Mo'unga-Barrett combination, they just stick with it and let them get settled and they're convinced that that's it. Or at some stage, maybe it's against Argentina, maybe it's in the fourth Bledisloe, do they change it around and see if the world's best number 10 can play in number 10 jersey?
Mehrts, where do you sit on that, Mehrts? It's obviously one, in your career, you had Carlos Spencer. I think you and he probably jumped in and out a little bit there at times. Where do you sit on the Mo'unga-Barrett structure now?
I think it's improving, and I like and understand the concept behind it. I mean, yes, I competed with Carlos for a number of years, and I used to play fullback in my early days when I had a little bit more pace. Didn't quite have the pace of Carlos, and I actually really enjoyed playing at 10 when Carlos played at 15, or occasionally he played at 12 outside me as well, because having another 10 out there to give you the voice, to know what you're looking at, and to help guide you is really, it's a real luxury. And I think, Damian McKenzie, we've seen him come into the first receiver role for the Chiefs a lot when he plays there, but he didn't do it with the All Blacks in that first test in Wellington. I'm not quite sure he's back at his sharpest since his ACL reconstruction in his knee. And I think Barrett last week, we know what he can bring in broken play, but also his ability to slot seamlessly in from 15 to step up and take that first receiver role and take a bit of responsibility off Mo'unga. I thought it looked a lot more balanced in that second game, and I think they'll continue, because I think the All Blacks will be desperate to win this game at Homebush, and then move on. They won't want to lose Brisbane either, but they can move forward, I guess, with a little bit more eye to the future, I guess, and see what Foster's looking to shape as his All Black team going into 2021.
Well, let me ask the question another way. If you were the sole All Black selector, who's your 10?
Mo'unga.
Yeah,
I absolutely agree with Barrett being an outstanding 10. I just think for the team at the moment, having the two of them on the field is part of their plan and part of what they need. The midfield is not quite settled yet. It was certainly better last week, and I love Leonard Brown being in there, whether it's at 12 or 13. This is your specialty, Morg, so I don't want to cut in on that. But I love seeing him starting, whether it's 12 with Ioane at 13 or Goodhue at 13, whether it's 13 with somebody else at 12. I don't know where you see Goodhue's best position. I always thought it was 13, but I love Leonard Brown. But just with those sort of changes at times in the midfield, having stability of Mo'unga and Barrett on the field, I think is important.
Well, let's talk those centres. Obviously, I talk about Anton Leonard-Brown a lot. I've spoken to Ben Darwin recently, and he wrote a piece for our newsletter. He's kind of pointed to, over the last couple of years, the way the All Blacks haven't settled on a centre combination since Conrad and Ma'a were in the centres there for such a long time together. They've chopped and changed. I think he told me 18 or 19 different combinations just in a couple of years. I think Anton Leonard-Brown is one of my first picked every time, and I've said that to you before, Morgs. What do you think of the centres and the All Blacks?
Yeah, I think they've probably got the right people there, but I'd probably agree with Mehrts. I thought Goodhue looked so much more comfortable at 13. He's accustomed to playing there with the Crusaders. Obviously been quite successful at the Crusaders playing 13. And Anton Leonard-Brown, I think he can be a much better person off the shoulder of a Mo'unga. Defends really well, communicates really well. He can be the connection between the whole backline. I think that's a really good spot for him at 12. I think he can help Goodhue in defence and push him early and give him good comms as well. And then in attack, I think he can create a bit better than Goodhue. I like the lines that Jack Goodhue runs from the 13 channel. I think that's a much more balanced and settled midfield. I think, to Mehrts' point about Mo'unga Barrett, I think they just feel that Mo'unga at 10 and Barrett at 15 adds up to 3, and Noah, 1 + 1 = 3 for them in that. They get their 2 best players on the field as opposed to having to choose one. So the more time those guys get together as well, the better they'll continue to be. So, and then what I'm looking forward to seeing is later in the Tri-Nation, does a Josh Ioane or someone get an opportunity to show what he can do and see what that future holds?
It's interesting, isn't it, and unusual that in the last Bledisloe test, we had an Australian 10 and 12 looking more like a traditional 10 and 12 than an All Black 10 and 12 than the All Blacks, with Tamura in there. So I think, while you've got fantastic talent there with Paisami and obviously Petaia, every time he touches the ball, he's going to be a threat, but you don't quite have that same sort of communicator role, second 5/8 that we call it in New Zealand, obviously from your 12. So I think Tamura, I don't know if you guys see it as being a bigger loss. I'm assuming you do, as what we would see it as.
Mate, look, I absolutely think he is because, particularly in that second game, he was so important to the structure of the team. He stepped into that first 5/8 spot a lot, and he corrals the team a lot more than I think anyone else in that back line does. Morgs always talks about who's doing the talking, who's doing the organising, and I think that's going to be a big loss for them. Talking about the Wallabies now, Mehrts, you've seen a lot more of Dave Rennie over there in New Zealand or potentially, from his work in Scotland. I was a little surprised at how he did chop and change from the first test to the second. Some guys he didn't muck around. Is that the way he's always operated, or do you think he's using this first series under him to really try a few blokes out?
Yeah, I think it's the latter. I think he's seeing an opportunity now without pressure on of results, particularly when you're playing the All Blacks 4 tests in a row, an established All Black team, and seeing the opportunity to, everything to gain and nothing to lose sort of thing. And there's no secret that working on the depth is a challenge, both at Wallabies level and I think at Super Rugby level in Australia, and it's important. And, maybe he's just sacrificing a little bit of potential short-term pain just to build that squad and then build the competitiveness within the squad as well. But as we saw, there wasn't that much pain in that first test. They really overachieved, I thought, in Wellington. I mean that as a compliment. I hope it doesn't sound condescending.
We said it on this show. We absolutely said it. Yeah.
So yeah, I think he's just trying to broaden the base and build that competitive edge within the squad as well. And you've got to start somewhere.
That's right. Morgs, quick question from the crowd. Felix asks, who should be the Wallabies number 10? JOC has said, didn't have his happiest game last time. You talked about this a bit in the newsletter, mate. Talk about the 10-12 combo, and then I might ask you, Mehrts, where you think Australia should go in the absence of Tamura, with guys like Simeone coming through. Simone. I call him Simeone all the time, don't I, mate? I don't know why I do that. Simone coming through. Yeah, maybe that's what it is. Morgs, talk about the 10-12 Wallabies for me, mate.
Yeah, I think that the point with James O'Connor was that all the credit points he put in the bank in the first test weren't negated by the ones he probably took out in the second. If you think he was excellent in the first, which we do, and you thought he was a little bit subpar, also he lost his centre partner quite early. It was a disorganised midfield for the Wallabies. I think we can allow him a couple more games to just have some consistency in that jersey. That's an important position. And then you look at our options. Noah Lolosio, do you throw him in to a Bledisloe test match in Sydney to try and keep the Bledisloe alive, or do you wait until a fourth Bledisloe if it's not alive, or do you wait for a Wallabies Argentina game to let him ease his way in? I'd be keen to stick with James O'Connor. I think it's been really interesting that Matt Tamura has gone probably 12 to 18 months ago from a guy who's not in the Wallabies run-on squad. No one was quite sure what his best position was. We probably thought it was in the number 22 jersey as a replacement coming on and being able to be sort of a multi-position player, a bit like Reece Hodge, to pretty much the crucial fulcrum in the back line of the Wallabies. They look much more settled defensively, as I think we've all seen with him at 12 in both the tackling decisions he makes and the way he organises it. He gives that assuredness to O'Connor and that balance to the midfield that Mehrts talks about, the first five, second five relationship. He's become a crucial Wallaby in the space of 12 months, which probably shows where we are at post-World Cup with the evolution of people moving overseas, guys like Samu Karevi, who we thought would probably play 60 tests in that number 12 jersey, going overseas. So the issue there is I think they probably have to play Simone. He's the one that earned that right, I would have thought, through Super Rugby. If they do want to bring a Noah Lolosio in later, then he has that combination with him. And I think he's probably the compromise between an out-and-out ball runner and someone who has a good little short passing game, been decent defensively, and has continually improved within that Brumbies setup. He's a logical choice for mine.
Mate, we talked about Samoa, and back when before he named his squad, we both said Michael Hooper has to be the captain, but I think Samoa was the only other guy that I thought might be a chance of captaincy. He's got a real good calm head on his shoulder. He's a real good leader. But look, I want to get your thoughts on James O'Connor. Morgs has said in the past that James O'Connor's a great footballer playing 10 rather than a genuine 10. I was a bit concerned with some of his kicking, his positional kicking, his work around the field. So important when you play the All Blacks to kick well, to get into the right areas of the field, to not unleash a Caleb Clark, or to make sure that you are pinning them down when you need to be. What do you think of James O'Connor in that 10 role, particularly in the kicking down?
Yeah, I don't mind him. Look, to be honest, we're not flush for choice over the side of the Tasman, are we, at the moment? I think it's still early to be putting Harrison, and obviously Lolosio is there as well, and his time will come. I suspect he'll probably, if he might get 15 or 20 this weekend in Sydney, and maybe look to start in Brisbane. But I don't mind O'Connor. I thought he, in the first game when the Wallabies were going forward, he was composed, he was controlled, he brought a smoothness, he was sort of the lubricant for the backs and the forwards, and he just kept the voice going and kept composed. He didn't try to do too much, and I thought that was really good. And I think he probably just flowed into that second game wanting to do the same thing, and then the environment was vastly different. The Wallabies didn't get that go forward board. They were getting hit harder in the tackles by the All Blacks, and there was a bit more to do. So I think that might have taken him a bit of time to adjust as well. I still don't think he had a bad game, and I still think 10 is a good position for him. As he's got all the skills. I remember seeing him, as we all did when 2011 World Cup, and precocious youngster. And I remember thinking at the time that there was so much pressure on this kid who had so much obvious talent that every time he got the ball, I think he felt like he had to do something extraordinary with it. And I thought he would have, perhaps in a settled All Black lineup at the time, they would have encouraged him more to just feed the ball on a few more times to somebody else and then get a second touch on the ball. And that's the way you can weigh on a game, rather than get the ball and do something incredible with it. So I think him in the 10 role, whether it's just that he's got naturally slower as you get older, as we all do, or whether it's a growing maturity. I don't know how I could get slower.
That's about me. That's about me.
The way I finished my career, I thought there's no way I can get slower, and I've managed to somehow. But whether it's just the role of the 10, where he's just not trying to do too much, I like it. And like I say, he's got the confidence and the voice that comes with age and experience. And who knows how much he's got left in his legs, how many years, but I think he's, if he feels he's got 2 or 3 years and potentially get to that World Cup, no harm in persisting with him. And he'll certainly be a good kind of a mentor for any players coming through in any positions, I think, in the back line.
Guys, let's just change pivot in the Wallabies team a little bit. There's a good question from the crowd here from Simon Nelson. Naisarani coming into the Wallabies squad. Do you think we're going to be looking at him as a 6? Now, obviously, we saw Ned Hannigan on the side there before. We saw Wilson at 6, Sam at 8 in the first one. I was stunned that Naisarani wasn't in the squad to start with. And Morgs, I talked about this last week when I said that when Wilson was potentially out, I was really concerned about that big-bodied back rower who could carry the ball, who could hit the line hard, who could make yards. That once Wilson sort of came out of the picture, you got Samu, you got Hannigan, and if you're not picking a Valentini, then you're not picking that guy who really does carry hard. Do you think Naisarani comes into the squad with the potential to come into the 23? Is that why he's in the squad?
Well, it would be an extraordinary backflip, truthfully, to say, well, a month ago you're not good enough to be in the squad, you're 6th or 7th ranked back rower to be picked. I would have thought that in the logjam, Samu should be still ahead of him, Valentini should be still ahead of him, Hannigan may have done enough. I dare say it's a little bit of attrition rate with the training and things like that, and some guys will be possibly playing some friendly games against Argentina this Friday and possibly the week after if Argentina need it. That option's there for them. So there's some more footy going on. So it's also an opportunity back in Australia to bring another guy into the new systems. We talked about Dave Rennie putting his accent on this Wallabies team. It's a guy, Isi Naisarani, you've got to think he's going to be involved over the next 4 years with the Wallabies. So it's a good opportunity now. You've got to kick up the backside. He went back to Canberra and we assume he's been training pretty hard. He didn't go back to Melbourne. He stayed out of lockdown. So he's been able to come straight back into this Wallaby squad and train with him at the Hunter Valley. I would assume that either Samu Hannigan or Valentini will be in front of him in selection, though.
Interesting. Mertz, did you
I mean, you look at Super Rugby and you think straight away, Naisarani's got to be one of your carriers in the Wallabies. He's just too good to leave out. And I mean, Rennie's not prone to mind games, I don't think, as such. But you're right. I mean, maybe his plan was always to bring him in at some point and just give him that little spark of, not getting that initial selection. I think from what I've heard, there may have been question marks over his fitness, or that might be something that they really wanted him to work on. Dave Rennie had a reputation in New Zealand for constructing the fittest team. The Chiefs were renowned in his era for being the fittest and the hardest working team in Super Rugby. And so he obviously, places a lot of stock in that. So maybe he's just always intended to. Pete Samu, whether the game just didn't flow his way, didn't really get the opportunity to run with the ball in hand that we see him doing in Super Rugby, whether that wasn't his role or whether he, was just perceived to have not got himself into the game. Who knows? But I think you bring Naisarani into the squad and you use him. I don't think he's a guy that you want sitting outside the 23 Morgs, is it? I mean, it's all a mental thing, and the coaches know that the players and how they want to best use them, how they handle the best use. But I would have thought you've got to have them in the 23. And the other thing to think about is we're well past the days where coaches just go from one game to the next. Let's pick our best team. They're thinking for this, incredibly tough rugby series for the next 6 or 7 weeks, plus the 2 they've already had. They're thinking through to next year. How do we want to play these guys? How do we want to see these guys in combination? How do we want to manage their workload? So there are a huge amount of permutations, huge amount of variables that they're thinking of constantly. So I don't think Rennie realistically would have been just turning his back on Naisarani, right, and not giving him a look in. So I think it was always on the cards.
So, mate, the suggestion there is that he's, given him some very set things to go away and get, and I'll bring you back in when you've, met some goals. That, the obvious question here for me, looking at this, the last, few games, All Blacks, Wallabies, reading about, Graham Henry, who didn't really chip Fozzie, but he didn't give Fozzie a lot of love when he talked about Dave Rennie escaping New Zealand rugby. Mertz, can you give us a bit of an insight? Is there a rivalry between Rennie and Foster already? Was the All Blacks selection of the coach, has it left a bad taste in people's mouths?
Oh, I don't think specifically the All Black coach selection, but I mean, who knows? I'm sure Foster's sick of hearing from people in different parts of New Zealand, and it's always binary. You love someone or you hate them as the All Black coach, and I think there's a certain sector of New Zealand that thinks Foster never really achieved well with the Chiefs. He left the Chiefs, Rennie came in and straight away won 2 titles. Now you don't know what might have been put in place there to carry them through to some of that. Like Mark Hammett when he left the Hurricanes, they only saw the fruit of his labour in subsequent seasons. But so there has been a perception in New Zealand that Foster didn't achieve well at the Chiefs and unlikely to do much different here or take the team forward. So, but I don't think personally. I think they've both been Chiefs men. When that sort of that sort of, what do they call it, rangatira over there, the tangata whenua, that sort of blood going through from the Chiefs, I don't think that'll drain out of anyone. So they've got some sort of, something in common, a fairly strong bond there from both having been involved with the Chiefs and poured everything into the Chiefs. So I don't think there'll be anything personal there. But like I say, Foster's probably thinking, God, in the back of people's minds, I left the Chiefs. This guy came in and won 2 titles. So, I need to step up and I want to show my wares as a coach.
Do you think they made the right choice for All Blacks coach?
I think at the time, I think the continuity when you've had a group like the Hansen, Smith, Henry, leadership group or staff go through for that long, the continuity that comes from having Ian Foster there, who's been in that system for a little while, and a lot of the other personnel, I think there was great benefit in having that continuity. I also wonder if they've left themselves a bit of a hedge there because, at the end of 2021, Warren Gatland will have coached the Lions. He will have had pretty intimate knowledge of the best players from the four home nations, as well as having played against South Africa, the current world champions. So, I think New Zealand Union's left themselves, as I say, a hedge for the end of 2021 to see how things are going and sort of reassess potentially. So the heat is a little bit on Foster, I think, in these, he's missed almost all what he would have wanted to do. He's only really got one season to clinch it.
Now, guys, we've got to let Mehrts go shortly, so I want to move to one last thing in a second. But before I do, predictions for this weekend, how do you think the game's going to go? Morgs, I'll go to you first, then I'll go to Mehrts.
Yeah, I think we talked about this in the newsletter too, but you'd think that the home ground advantage would be a big thing for the Wallabies, but the All Blacks have an amazing record at home, which especially recently, yes, it's indicative of them holding the Bledisloe Cup, but it's normally a place they come and they play well. It's normally a place that they play well early in rugby championship, so this will be a bit of a different beast with both teams coming back over. So it'll be interesting to see exactly what happens. Look, I expect more from the Wallabies than last game. It'll be really important who fills that number 12 jersey. I think that forward pack can be quite settled. I was really interested in Mehrts' ideas around Naisarani, whether he comes straight back in. I think everyone picked him as their stand-up number 8 for the first test, and he didn't even make the squad. The way Wilson's played a 6 and an 8 with Naisarani and Wilson, and then Hooper doing what he does. Gee, that's a pretty good looking back row for the Wallabies. One of the most balanced and I would think dangerous and probably one that caused more concern for the All Blacks than most back rows recently. That's an interesting selection one there. I think there's an opportunity there for the Wallabies to build what they did in the first test. That should have given them a lot of confidence. That shouldn't have been too dented from the second test. If they get their set piece right, if they kick judiciously and proactively, I think Mehrts' great point about James O'Connor was that the Channel 10 performance, the number 10 performance, Mehrts will know better than most, is very much relying on your forward pack. Mehrts played behind a Rolls-Royce pack at Canterbury Crusaders and All Blacks. It's much easier there with front football. O'Connor didn't get that in the second test. So if the Wallabies forwards can get their set piece right, get the breakdown right, get us on the front foot, then there's a genuine opportunity there for this Wallabies team to show a lot more than they've really showed thus far.
Mehrts, what do you think we'll see, mate?
I think there's quite a lot of room for improvement from both sides, and I think one of the things I'd sort of forgotten about the Wallabies in Auckland was they'd been over there for 4 weeks. Now, human nature, Morgs, you know what it's like when you're on tour. Even the best atmosphere in the world, at the end of 4 or 5 weeks away, no matter how hard you want to focus just on that game before you get on the plane, human nature says you've got that in your back of your mind. I'm leaving tomorrow. I'm going back home tomorrow. And some of our worst performances were always at the end of a tour in South Africa. And so I think, there's a possibility that played a role in Auckland as well. But I don't think the All Blacks would be patting themselves on the back too much. It was a step up in physicality. At the same time, they still, without Caleb Clark's contribution to the game, they still didn't get maybe the go forward they would have liked. They were still relying on 2 or 3 guys. Artie Savia was one, Jack Goodhue, that great run that led to Aaron Smith's try, and Caleb Clark, obviously. And I think they will see a lot more improvement themselves this week as well. The physicality, yes, they've put down a marker there, but just being a bit, sometimes a bit more savvy with where they can move the ball to space, because I think they will look at opportunities missed when Australia was quite short. They were quite condensed on defence and there were opportunities out wide. So I think the All Blacks have got a bit of improving too. And I would think, as Morg said, they have had good results. And saying that, the Wallabies have won a couple in the last 10 years, a couple of good ones at Homebush as well. But I would think the All Blacks would be up a notch again, and maybe a little bit too strong.
Mehrts, you mentioned touring there. I got a sneaking suspicion that I think you and Morgs would have been great tourists together, probably in the Lottie Takiri mould of enjoying a tour. We've talked about Super Rugby and the changes coming in. Whether South Africa ever makes it back into some sort of a domestic, of a provincial competition with us remains to be seen. We're going to lose something if we don't play South Africa. There's a lot of talk always about New Zealand enjoying that connection to South Africa. But I just want to throw up a photo from your days and just get you to talk us through this connection to South Africa. What does it mean for you that there won't be a South African teams in the provincial competitions?
Well, that was actually, I was embraced by South Africans when I did that in Pretoria in 1999, because I think it was the first time they'd seen any sign of aggression or spine from me on the field. So I think they were actually proud of me. Look, I've been a strong advocate for us going alone in our own time zone for quite some time, and that's based just on the product, the travel constriction, the travel logistics, and all that sort of stuff, which I don't think is good for our product. And I think we need a much shorter Super Rugby season that stops encroaching on the Shoot Shield or the Mitre 10 Cup in New Zealand. So I think the Super Rugby needs to be shorter. I think it needs to be time zone based, and I'd like to think that there would still be playoffs for the various region winners. I think Argentina needs to go with the States. That's logical. South Africa probably needs to develop Dubai franchises or Barcelona. I've said that for a while. So I don't want to see the end of South Africa. I was born there. I was brought up with my parents, who were New Zealanders, went over there, and my father played rugby over there and actually played against the All Blacks in 1970 when they came on tour. So I grew up with this whole history of New Zealand, South Africa rugby. I don't want to see that ended at all. I just think our product in Super Rugby has to be good, and I don't think playing in these three really distinct time zones did anyone any favours. So that's the whole basis to it. But, in terms of disengaging completely from South Africa, absolutely not. And I think Test rugby and playoff rugby needs to still include the whole Southern Hemisphere.
Mehrts, I absolutely love what you're saying there. Bang on with some of the stuff that Morgs and I have talked about. That love the South Africans, but you've got to make a product that fits your market over here and fits your viewership and gets people engaged as much as you can. And for those who are listening rather than watching this, I showed a photo of Andrew with the double bunger with both fingers up at the Pretoria crowd, and I absolutely love that photo because we want to see that passion. We want to see that those teams up against each other and people caring. We want to see crowds getting revved up. Absolutely loved it, mate. Absolutely always love to hear you talk on Fox Sports and otherwise. You've got amazing insight into the game. Morgs, we'll let Andrew go. Have you got anything before we go?
No, we'll catch up soon for a drink. I'm actually really impressed with how nice you were about the Wallabies, mate. You're just too nice at the moment. I thought you'd hopefully just throw some sort of niggle about the All Blacks. I think, the All Black players got such great individual players, and the challenge there for the Wallabies to be the better team on Saturday will be exciting. I'm always in awe of watching Mehrts as a player, and I think we're both pretty happy now for South Africa to be out of Super Rugby because we're not playing or indeed coaching, so we don't get to go on tour there anyway. So why should current players forget about going to Cape Town? Don't worry about it.
Tough place to play, but it was a pretty good place to tour, to be fair. But look, I was always kind to the Wallabies. I was always nice to the Wallabies playing against them. They always tended to make more yards running against me. So, I did my bit for Australian rugby, but hopefully catch up soon, Morgs. And, look, if you're 1.5 players short for the classic Wallabies at any point, I've got no problem throwing on a gold jersey at some stage.
Mate, I might hold you to that. We've got you on tape too. That's brilliant.
It's recorded.
We'll see you in Hong Kong next year, mate. Perfect.
No problem. Good to tour there.
Thanks, Mehrts. We really appreciate it. Thank you, Mehrts. All the best, mate.
Thanks.
Morgs, an absolute champion bloke. And, mate, geez, he's got some good insight. I loved his point that he made about that, what he saw in that first game with the players over the ball, holding the ball of the player on the ground to get the penalty. So it's no longer about stealing. It was always about stealing. David Pocock's just retired with the most steals ever by any Test player, and some margin ahead of the likes of the McCaws of the world. But that's really different, isn't it? He's got a great rugby brain on him, doesn't he?
Yeah, he does. He's actually frustratingly self-deprecating. There's him and Chris Whittaker, who are always the two blokes that frustrate me the most, being an excellent player and a great rugby brain. He's always a good guy to try and find that different angle that you might not have seen yourself, Mehrts. And that's a really good point around just some of the art that goes into slowing the ball down, into showing pictures to the referee. It's not just about, at the moment, being David Pocock in that immovable position, stealing the ball, being cleaned out, ripping the ball with you and passing it back to one of your players to counter or to play off turnover. At the moment, it's very much showing a picture where you're over the ball and making it look like that tackled player is not releasing to win a penalty. You see at the moment just players over the ball, locking that in, and even in the attacking side, trying to trap tacklers in there to try and show that they're not rolling away. So there's those sorts of things within our ruck that, look, and we talked about the referees, we might have given them a little bit of a go, but it's not an easy job. So we just need to help them, upskill them about facilitating the right kind of rugby we want. We want players engaged at the ruck because it takes players out of the defensive line, but we also want to promote that ball being available for attacking teams. So it's finding that balance there.
Nice. Now, Morgs, the show's almost finished. What we're going to do now is we're going to cut to your quick quarantine questions with Lukhan Salakaia-Loto. Now, this one's a really interesting one. As I said, the question I loved in here is when you asked him where he wanted to play in the back line and the line he had and the way he spoke to Dave Rennie. We're going to watch this. We'll pop back in. We'll take a couple more questions from the crowd, and that'll wrap up the show for tonight. But for now, let's cross to quick quarantine questions with Lukhan Salakaia-Loto.
Lukhan Salakaia-Loto, thanks for joining me for a few questions. Mate, so let's just talk about game day, the lead up to, one of those late night games. What do you like on game day? Pretty chilled, or you get pretty pumped early?
I think it's sort of changed over the years, but I'm still young, so I've had a bit of time to sort of get a routine. Pretty chilled, don't like to do too much. Late wake up, I probably only eat once or twice on game day, so not too much food consumed, and just get a bit of a sleep and then just chill and listen to music most of the day, really.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point. When you're young, I remember mine, early on, I would just probably copy what my roomie did. I didn't know what worked for me. I just sort of wandered around, did what everyone did, and I might have got excited by the pasta at the buffet too during a game, so I felt a bit heavy. The last thing you want is you're lethargic and heavy at 7:30 come game time. So that's a really good point to make about finding out what works for you. If you're pretty chilled then in the change room, any blokes get really pumped up and amped in the change room?
Oh, probably at the Reds, probably Harry Wilson. Him and Fraser McWright. They bring a lot of energy to our team, so they're running around, got the headgears on and just bumping heads with each other.
Well, let's see what they're like in a few years when they've been bashed around a bit more. It's good to have those young kids bring the juice for everyone. What about when you get a day off? What do you try to do to relax away from the game?
Well, I've got younger siblings at home, so I've got a fair bit to do. My normal day off pretty much just drop them off to school, clean up around the house. Sort of my only day at home, so got to pull my weight when I'm at home because I'm not home very often. Chill with my dogs, take them for a walk, relax and just kick the feet up until it's time to pick up my siblings again from school. So not too much going on my day off.
Mate, are they the coolest kids at school when Lukhan Salakaia-Loto is on school pickup?
Well, now most of the time, my younger sister and all that, their friends think I'm their dad because I'm so big, but they just tell them that I'm the older brother. But yeah, no one knows who I am, so just sneak past.
That's not going to last much longer, mate. The way you keep playing the way you are. What about growing up? We talked about rugby, the way you came through. Did you have a classic Wallaby, a former Wallaby that was a bit of a hero or someone you admired coming through?
I enjoyed watching Cliffy. Wycliffe Palu, he was probably one of my favourites to watch out of the sort of the Waratahs and Wallabies players, just because his game speaks for itself and he's pretty physical, pretty dominant, and the best thing about it was he was just soft-spoken and just quiet off the field. So I've heard from older players that I've been lucky enough to play alongside. So probably Cliffy's probably the one that sticks out for me.
I think you've chosen well. I was lucky enough to play with Cliffy, and I think you summed it up. He let his actions on the field speak volumes. I'm going to throw a bit of a scenario at you now, right? There's a huge injury drama within the back line. We're going to put you in the backs. Where would we stick you, and what kind of player would you be like? How would you go?
I would say probably 12. Play 12.
Nice.
Play a bit direct. Ball play a bit. Can kick. Fancy myself there. Goal kicking as well.
Yeah, okay. Oh, Johnny Eels then. Yeah, that's good, mate. Right footer?
Yeah.
Or both?
Yeah, right footer.
Yeah, nice. Well, mate, we unearthed the talent here. I want to see some training footage of you throughout this rugby championship and beyond. I want to see this goal kicking practice, and we might get you to recreate the Johnny Eels winning the Bledisloe with you. That would have been brilliant. Yeah,
well, I told Dave Rennie if he picks me at 12, I'll pass the ball more than Samuel Curry. So, see if he decides to put me.
Yeah. If you were having a cheat day, or there's the coaches and the trainers not around, what's your go-to?
Straight to KFC.
Nice. And what's your order? We've had a few orders. What would you order?
So I'll go a large zinger box, change the burger to a zinger bacon and cheese, extra mayo, extra cheese. It comes with 3 Ricker wings, so I probably add 3 more. Change the drink to 1.25 litre, and fresh chips with extra chicken salt.
That is elite ordering. That is the little bacon and cheese. That you can't buy that. That's experience. You know what I did do sometimes? Sometimes, this is how stupid I was. I do the 1.25, but I go Pepsi Max because you don't want too many calories. You don't want any wasted calories. So I thought that after ordering all that, the changing from Pepsi to Pepsi Max would make a difference. Nice. Good man. Mate, thanks for spending some time having a chat to us, and good luck for the rest of the year.
No, good. Appreciate having me. Thanks, folks.
Morgs, what a lovely fella he is. I really like to hear him talk. But I tell you what, you wouldn't want to be getting his little siblings in trouble in the schoolyard. He's a big unit.
Yeah, there'd be no bullying going on in that family. None of those kids would be in trouble. I just love watching him mature as a person. Obviously, he's been through a bit recently, but getting the opportunity at the Reds and then just becoming a leader in some of the elements of both the Reds game and the Wallabies team makeup. And he's just a great human being and an excellent footballer and in very good form. We've talked about Matt Phillip and Lukhan Salakaia-Loto really grabbing their opportunities with both hands. Keeping him in the locking position has been excellent. Moved to 6 at the back end of the previous game, which is definitely a struggle. So good to see that he's been doing enough work to make the coaches confident that he can do that at the back end of a game. So he's definitely one of the very, very positive elements of the last 2 games for the Wallabies.
He has, mate. And just a quick shout out to all of our listeners. If anyone works for KFC and knows the marketing manager, we're looking for a sponsor because Morgs loves talking KFC with the Wallabies. Everyone, it's always about what bucket this, what wings that, mate. It's your constant theme. I want more rugby out of you. Bring me more KFC.
No, when I do my journalistic side, my interviewing, I do my homework. I research exactly what my subject's going to talk about. I don't know much about this what's it called, KFC thing.
Mate,
I just
no
say,
one's,
look, guys, what
no
do you
one's
eat?
believing this. No one's believing this.
I'll tell you what now, especially now I'm not playing, I can't afford to eat that rubbish.
Mate, I tell you what, if you're on the podcast, you can't see, but Morg salivates when he talks about KFC, so don't believe he doesn't know what it is. Let's take a quick question from the audience,
I'm getting
mate.
hungry. Let's go. I want to finish up.
Ben Crace asked, looking at Salakaia-Loto there, we've got, if we had Arnold or Coleman back, would you stick him at 6 with Wilson Hooper as a back row? What about Fraser getting a go over Hoops versus Argentina, Morgs?
I would think that we'll see Fraser at some stage against Argentina. If we maybe the second one, if we have a successful first one against Argentina, then it's not a gimme game. Argentina's an excellent team. They'll have had some time together. I don't think Lukhan Salakaia-Loto is a test number 6. I think he's that good a player that he can play 6 at Super Rugby level. But I do think I can't concentrate all the heckling I'm getting here from you guys.
I'm posting the heckling comments up as we go.
I'll tell you what, Adam Scott, the golfer, has really let himself go. I think he's been on it as well. Adam's a good rugby man that we see contribute to lots of online forums with rugby. So it's great to have him involved. But look, for my own, Lukhan Salakaia-Loto has shown that he's a test lock. We won't see Coleman back, I wouldn't have thought, for a while. He has had that operation. He's still coming back from it with London Irish. And obviously Arnold hurt himself recently over in France as well. Hypothetically, if those guys come back, then they just go toe-to-toe for the 2 positions and we have an excellent lock on the bench. And Matt Phillips probably, at the moment, that slight rung behind them. And so you bring all those guys back. We haven't even mentioned he who must not be named, Isaac Rodder, who I think we will see him back in Super Rugby sooner rather than later, and I doubt it will be at the Reds. But I just think it's time he'll end up back in Australian rugby.
Right, there you go. Well, I tell you what, I was interesting. I saw Lottie Takiri was really firm on that on Twitter as soon as we talked about who might be coming in. Lottie was just like, the blokes who left, nowhere near it. Like, he was like, do not let them back in anywhere. So there'll be some hurt blokes and some hurt feelings to be crossed for some of those guys to come back, I would think. Morgs, let's wrap it up. We've nearly hit the hour mark. We'll give the final word to Chris here, who obviously is a listener for a couple of weeks. Pork chop, there you go. As you called me last week, as I think I'd like to serve back up at you. But guys, look, that was the Rugby Ruckus Type 5. Morgs, I thoroughly enjoyed talking to Mehrts. What a rugby brain, mate. And, mate, I'm looking forward to this week.
How good's Mehrts? Yeah, I really like some of his input on the Fox stuff, as you mentioned. It's good to have someone who can have a bit of a laugh, be enjoyable to watch and entertain, but also be really insightful. So it's been great to see him on there. Cannot wait. I'll be out there on Saturday nights. Some of our viewers I might pop up somewhere around the ground, so hopefully I'll see everyone out there. You going out to the game, Benny?
There you go, mate.
Oh, mate, how rich are you?
Mate, I'm supporting the game. I've bought my Indigenous jersey. The game needs me.
Cheap. I'm still buying last year's ones because they're on sale for the kids.
Well, mate, I like the look of this one. I like the look of this one, and I'm going out on Saturday. I've bought a ticket as well, which I didn't do for many, many years going to the rugby. I was always a journo going along. Bought my ticket, bought my jersey. I'll see you out there. You're out there, aren't you? Of course.
Yeah, I'll be out there, mate. Mum and Dad are driving up from the South Coast. They're excited. Dad will probably have his All Black jersey on, so he'll be there, mate. So, mate, a lot of people are excited about the game. So hopefully the weather holds and it's a good night because, we obviously know that the pendulum shifts to an All Black team if it's a wet night because they play so much footy in it. So a nice dry night, a couple of clearing days would be good. Benny, maybe you should do the Golden Eagle at Rose Hill straight across the road pretty much to the Bledisloe. That's a big day for you. How's that?
That is a great call. I might have to look into that. Look, that was the Rugby Ruckus. You'll catch Morgs and I wrapping up after the game on Sunday, mate. I look forward to talking about it with you then.
Thanks, Benny. Can't wait.
See you guys.